Hey, welcome to Sustainable Stace. We're doing rhubarb today. Let's talk about how to harvest it, how to propagate it, and most of all, how to get the best yields with the least possible work.
I'm Stacy Taves. For me, healthy food and sustainability are totally connected. You can grow it yourself. Nature is generous.
Well, here we are in the rhubarb patch. I've got a few different types of rhubarb, and you can see there's a stick standing up next to these plants. About 6 weeks ago, all there was a stick here because rhubarb disappears over winter and then it comes back in spring. So if you're starting out with a new rhubarb plant or two, keep this in mind. It's a perennial. It keeps coming back. So it'll die off at the end of the growing season and you'll think, oh my goodness, it's gone. And it doesn't really look very obvious. Mark it with a stick so you at least know that in spring that's where it's going to come up again. Won't need to mark that again for a year. I've got a couple different varieties here. You can't hurt rhubarb very easily. It's pretty vigorous. You can pull up any old stalk like that. Keep in mind that the stem is the leaf's poisonous. The stem's a little sour, but it cooks up or bakes beautifully. So that's a really thick-stemmed variety of rhubarb. And then I've got a really thin-stemmed variety that's a little bit sweeter. When you go to pick rhubarb, there's not much to it like you see. You just pull the stem up. But realize that every leaf is a solar panel putting energy back into the root system and increasing its health. So my big focus in spring is just pack a bunch of compost and freshly made soil around it, which will provide nutrition for it, and the stalks will start building up and growing up wherever you've marked that they were last fall. You never want to pick more than about 1/3 of your rhubarb at once. Leave 2/3, let it grow a couple weeks, come back and pick it again. It's very vigorous and one of the first things that'll come up in spring. The other thing you want to realize, if your soil's off, your rhubarb's not going to be healthy. You might not be able to tell it, but I'm in the shadow of a really large tree. This is right on the edge of my garden space, and there's roots going under this rhubarb patch from a big tree. I live on the West Coast. It's wet here, and soil that gets a lot of water and has big forest plants on it, it tends to acidify over winter. So I had a little thought this last spring that my rhubarb wasn't flourishing as well as it should. I grabbed a handful of lime and threw it on each one of my bushes, but only the location where the stick was. I couldn't even see the bush. Well, that changed the soil's pH. It brought up the pH. And the result is I've got way more stalks of rhubarb than I've ever had before, just with one handful of lime on each. So you want to pick a little bit, take your biggest stalks, leave your leaves behind, put them on the compost pile. You can bake all sorts of yummy things. Special thing for my kids, I use applesauce for my apple trees and rhubarb, and I make applesauce rhubarb muffins. Tastes amazing. And I have a couple different varieties. Rhubarb, really, you shouldn't have to buy it. You can pass it off or get it from a friend, and I'll show you how easy it is. Any old plant, because it keeps on growing, has a massive root ball underneath it. So this plant, I've decided it's going to have a baby. And all we got to do is pick a spot. I've got one here where I don't have a rhubarb plant and I want one. And I'm just going to go right into the center of the plant with a shovel, crank on it once, and the result is, now you could take that to a friend or a neighbor, but I've got rhubarb right there. See all the roots sticking out? And then, because I was fortunately thinking ahead, I've got another plant here, or another shovel. I'll dig a little hole that's about proportional. Get a nice hole that's the size of the clump I've got. Take a little handful of that organic fertilizer to put in there that we've made ourselves. Alfalfa meal is the main ingredient there. And then just take that rhubarb plant, put it in, and if you cover that up with a little bit of fresh soil from where you brought it and water it, you're good to go. And as you already know, if you followed me at all, I think coffee sacks are kind of like the magic bullet. So once it's packed down and I get a coffee sack around it, then I know it's not going to have any weed competition. It's going to be able to grow really well and perform super well with no competition in the garden. Hey guys, so just to recap here in the rhubarb patch, it's a super simple plant to grow, and once you get 1 or 2 plants going, you're always going to have a constant supply of rhubarb. A few things to remember: mark where it is at fall or winter time as it winds down so you'll know where it's going to come up in spring. Think about the soil health. A little bit of lime might be the magic bullet to unlock the nutrients that currently are locked away where it is. Keep it nicely surrounded by something that's going to keep down the weeds. I use coffee sacks. You could use cardboard. You could use mulch from dead leaves. All those will help so that it doesn't have to fight anything else for the nutrients in the soil. When you go to pick it, just take about 1/3 of the stalks at a time, cut them away, and you're set to go. Share it with friends and pull plants from others. They're easy to chop up and divide. If you want more helpful tips on things like this, be sure to subscribe to the channel right here. And for even more, check out sustainablestace.com.